Okay, hello, TEC400. Prof. Braden Evans coming at you once again with your lecture. This week, we're going to talk about the peer review process, okay? And as I've mentioned here in recent weeks, my goal is to, really try to manage your workload and time, keep our lectures short and sweet, and really, I've really tried to cut down this recording to be efficient in terms of time. So hopefully, you're able to make use of that extra time working away on your various written assignments and so on, okay? All right, so I'm going to go through the process of peer reviewing here. It relates to team writing. So we just had our team writing lecture, and, you can sort of, tie these concepts into what we talked about in team writing, okay? So in this case, we're getting together to read, comment on, and recommend improvements on each other's written work in a team writing context, right? So this is where we pull out our critical skill set, our critical thinking caps that we put on, right? And so, one of the best ways to actually become a better writer, right, is to be a good critiquer, right? Because you're looking for things that sound great. You're looking for things that sound not so great, right? And you're giving some advice on how to make it more clear, better, like a better level of writing, right? So it shouldn't really come as a surprise to us that the more editing we do, the better we become at actual, writing, a writing skill set, right? It's really important, such an important piece. And I'll be honest with you guys, as a professor, I believe it's something that does not get enough attention, right? I think you guys, you compete, you have a lot of competing deadlines, you've got a lot of things on the go. And so often a project just gets thrown together. Okay, give me your part, let's just hand it in. And it's clear that it hasn't been, reviewed in detail. So when you get into the professional workplace and you've got, an employer that's asking you to produce some writings, you want to have some good habits, right? Some good techniques, some well-developed skills at sort of taking a well-written document and making it excellent, right? Improving on the document you've put together, okay? So really important piece of this whole team writing process is this peer review process, looking at each other's work and trying to improve it, okay? Now, so when you're doing this, you're evaluating someone's work. You're criticizing them, which can be kind of tricky, right? You're suggesting improvements. And, it's important that we do this in a certain way, right? So if you send me your part of the paper and I go through it, I cover it in red ink, I said, this has got to change, and I return it to you, I say, this is terrible, redo it. How are you going to receive that criticism? You're not going to take it very well, right? You won't appreciate that you put in all this time and effort, you tried to produce something of high quality, and your teammate is telling you that it's no good, that it's garbage, right? So part of our finesse and our skill set as good technical communicators is being able to critique things in a way that they should be well received, right, by the writer, right? And yeah, so how do we do that? How do we tell someone their essay is boring without hurting their feelings? Well, we can talk about that a little bit today, all right? So when we start the peer review process, right, this is probably laid out in our team writing document, our plan, right? Hey, we're gonna get together and review our first draft on August 1st, right? And so everybody gets together, you have your parts prepared, and you start sharing each other's work, okay? You should have some parameters, right? You should have some like kind of goals and objectives to keep in mind, right? Think about the purpose of your project, who it's for, who the audience is, what the topic is. Are we sticking to the topic? Are we sticking to the scope? Do we have the appropriate context, right? So revisiting the whole purpose of this whole thing is important, right? And so it should be really clear to everybody in the group in advance that the writer's goal is, to convey a specific message, right? And we should all be as we say, the expression is we should all be on the same page. We should all be in agreement in terms of what we are trying to do and how we are trying to do it. Okay. And then, I think as a writer, it's important that we ask for criticism and we ask, questions about these things. So we should ask, like, hey, am I meeting the objectives? Am I staying within the scope of the project? Am I writing to the standard that we want? Am I being too technical? Or am I being too informal, right? We should be seeking out the truth, seeking out some help, and will be willing to accept, it's very important, willing to accept criticism from our teammates, right? Because it's not to be mean, they're doing it to try to help, right? To try to improve the overall product. So we have to keep that in mind as we go through the process. All right, so when you're asking questions during the peer review process, they should be very specific, right? So it shouldn't be like, what does this mean? Like addressing an entire section of the paper, right? That's not helpful. That doesn't really help the writer kind of focus on what needs to be changed or improved, right? But how about this? If I write a piece on this virtual machine and I say to you, my teammate, I say, does my explanation of the virtual machine make sense to you, right? And then they can get real specific. They can read the passage and go, oh yeah, this is really good. But I don't know what the flux capacitor is. What is that, right? What is this piece of equipment you're referring to? So if there's passages that are not clear, they know specifically what they can address. So it becomes so much easier in terms of the process, the more specific we get, right? Let's say we're thinking about our audience and we say, okay, we got mostly technical customers, but some people that are not, the readers of this material won't be so tech savvy. Could they understand it, right? Because it should be relatable to the least sort of technical individuals in your entire audience, right? So do the less technical people understand it? Is my writing style appropriate? Do I use language that people will understand, or do I have too many technical words, right? These are really specific questions to ask that can help improve the quality of the project, of the paper. How about the chapter titles and the headings and the sections, right? Does it help to organize things? Does it allow the reader to kind of follow and jump to the important parts they want to look at, right? What about the figures and images? Are they compelling? Are they good? But also, are the captions good, right? Are the captions set up in a way that, oh yeah, it fully explains that figure, right? Which is what I was looking for, right? Okay. What else? Okay. We don't want to just look at things like grammar and spelling, right? And punctuation. There's there's spell checkers for that. Spell checkers don't do the full peer review process for you. That's great. I mean, it's good to edit for correctness that way. But there's a whole other level of making, a compelling written document, right? So, first of all, is it interesting? Did you write a real boring paper, or did you have some interesting things to talk about? Are the people who are reading it going to want to learn about this? Is it adapted to the audience? So is it technically appropriate, right? Or is it way too technical or not technical enough, right? Depending on your purpose, if you need to persuade people to do something, to take some action, right? Is it persuasive enough? Are you really selling people on the purpose of this thing, this document, right? That you're preparing for them. Organization is big, right? Are the right pieces in the right place, right? Do you start telling the story very broadly and then get more narrow and specific as you go, right? Which I think is a good approach, is the right approach, right? Start with a little bit of background and the big picture, and then get more and more specific as you get down to it, right? Is it clear? Is it coherent? Does it use transitions? This is really big in team writing because sometimes you grab one section and your partner grabs another section and there's nothing linking the sections. There should be some good transitions to lead you from one piece to another, right? Is the title appropriate? Do we have a solid introduction and conclusion? We've talked about, in report components, we've talked about the importance of these sections, how we underestimate their value, right? Sentences, are they clear? Clarity is such an important part I mean, we underestimate that a lot. We focus on, you know, spelling and grammar, but we don't always think, is the sentence that I've written here actually easy to understand? And then, you know, hopefully I've shown to you guys over the course of this semester that visual communications are so important in written assignments, right? So are my graphs and tables and figures and images appropriate and compelling? Do they help me tell my story? Okay. Okay. One thing to avoid is really just trying to take over the paper and personalize everything and say, you know, this is how I would do it. You don't want everybody else's section to be just written the way you would do it. You have to compromise your style, your approach to the style, right? And try to allow for everybody's voice to come through in the paper. Okay. So rather than, you know, focus your objections or criticisms or comments on your own personal style, you should focus on, like, what are the accepted guidelines that we have agreed to in our group charter, in our group, you know, contract or sort of project outline, right? That should be the focus, not your, you know, personal writing style. Okay. So think about how we said we were going to write this thing and then stick to that, right? Make sure everybody is conforming to the ideas that we set out as to sort of how what the tone of the paper should be like, how technical it should be, right? Focus on that when you're making your suggestions, okay? Also, when you're constructing your feedback, give a full explanation. If you want it to be useful and if you want the writer to take your suggestions into account, don't say something like, oh, it seems disorganized. The paper is unclear. You know, that's not helpful at all, right? Explain specifically what about the paper is disorganized, right? And then use like specific examples or details or specific passages or sentences to say, here's what I mean. Okay. You started out by talking about, you know, cloaking technologies and then finished out by talking about, you know, innovation. But it should be the other way around. We should start talking about broadly innovation and then say how that led to, you know, cloaking technologies, right? And so we want to make sure we're being like specific enough that the writer can easily address the suggestion or criticism that we have. Oops. And then, you know, you want to give a suggestion on how the problem might be corrected. So it's one thing to say it's not clear, right? Or it's disorganized. Then it's another thing to say, here's how it might sound a little better, right? If you move this section here and move this section here, now it follows, right? Your headings follow each other in a more logical way. Okay. It's easy to overlook that when you're writing something, when you have so many ideas in your head, you're throwing it all down. You're going to get that kind of feedback from people, and that's a good thing. It's helpful for them to tell you. But we got to tell people in a specific way so they know what to do and how to correct the problem. And we can do that by suggesting how the problem could be solved. Okay. Continue to focus on the rules that you set out as a team, right? Don't just say you should switch the order of these two paragraphs. You should say these paragraphs should be switched because paragraph 2 actually has more introductory information than paragraph 1, right? It's more general. The second one, the other one's more specific, so they should follow in that order. Okay. And you know, I got to admit, I'm kind of guilty of it sometimes. Sometimes we take control of things and, you know, we try to rewrite the whole thing, right? We say, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'm going to redo the whole thing. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you with your workload and your time, and it doesn't help your teammates to become better writers, right? So don't rewrite the draft yourself. Make suggestions, make corrections, and we do them in a tactful way, right? We do them in a way that is positive and constructive, right? This is where the term constructive criticism says it comes in, right? It's to be helpful, critiquing in order to be helpful, to improve, right? If you want it to be sort of a well-executed team exercise, everybody needs ownership of the document. Okay, if there's one person that's controlling too much of your team document, um, you lose the team chemistry. People say, okay, that's your baby, go ahead, you do it, and the level of engagement from the group in general will just decrease. Okay, so give your teammates, other writers, the opportunity to improve their writing skills by learning sort of what they've done well and what they've done not so well, right? And being constructive also means like finding positive and encouraging things to say, right? So if there's any opportunity to compliment what the writers produced, do that, right? So something like, hey, great job on the introductory section. Where I would focus your revisions is in that first heading in the body of the paper. That's where some of the clarity goes, right? So right away, you're starting out with a positive statement. Great job on the introduction. This really puts the writer in a positive frame of mind, gives them ownership over the success of the document, and makes it a lot more likely that they're going to adopt your suggestions, right? So really, I think that's an important first step, is to sort of work through the draft and look for those things that were done the way the team wants them to be done. What are the things that were done well? And make sure you take the time to, encourage the writer, right? Like, let them know that they've been successful in some parts of it. And that way, criticisms and critiques are so much better received. Okay. Okay. So you've gone through someone's, section. You get to the last page. You've made all of your suggestions and edits, right? Now it's a really nice idea to wrap it up, right? Kind of have a big overview of your review. I know this takes time to do when you've got lots of other projects on the go, but you can produce such a good quality written document if you're doing these things, right? So how do you wrap up your review? Okay, think big pictures, right? Big picture observations and impressions you had. Hey, you've got a great ability to just really sort of deliver the material in the right level of sort of technical content, right? It's not too technical, it's not too informal, it's just right. And then, what are your, oops, sorry. What are your main suggestions? Overall, like, it was really well written. I would say, like, kind of the main the main critiques I have is that, you could probably use fewer words, right? Become a little more efficient in your sentences. Some kind of general observation like that, but also that's very, presented in a sort of non-confrontational way. Okay. Um, so, organize your comments, right? What's grammar related? What's content related? What's organization related? What points to things being boring or interesting, right? Which are the ones that are maybe they would be nice to incorporate? Might be some good ideas, but which ones are much more critical, right? Oh, this section is actually inaccurate. We have to change that. And then there's other sections that are maybe, less critical, less important, right? So always bring it back to the rules of your group and maybe use some examples if you can, right? To get more specific with your feedback, right? So you also want to double check meaning, right? Sometimes it's not clear what they're trying to say, right? So are you saying this or are you saying this, right? It allows the writer the opportunity to be very specific, and then maybe helps show them that this passage could be written in a way that is more clear, right? Lots of positive comments and sympathetic ways to say, this is how you can improve, okay? Done with a little bit of love and care, peer reviewing can be such a productive experience for both sides. Okay, folks, hopefully you found that helpful. And the next time you review your peers' work, you can do it in a way that is tactful, fair, and constructive. Okay, have a great week, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye for now.